We are witnessing a dramatic and highly consequential moment in the Western Hemisphere, one that marks a profound shift in U.S. foreign policy, regional stability, and global geopolitics. On January 3, 2026, U.S. President Donald J. Trump announced that American forces had conducted a military operation in Venezuela that resulted in the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores. The president declared that the United States would run Venezuela temporarily until a transition of power could occur, triggering intense debate and widespread international reaction. President Trump's description of events was stark and unambiguous. Speaking from Mar-a-Lago, he stated that U.S. forces had carried out an operation of unprecedented scale and complexity, overwhelming Venezuelan military capacities within hours and taking Maduro into custody. He suggested that Venezuela's oil infrastructure would be rebuilt through American expertise and investment, and that the incumbent government, at least for now, would effectively be overseen by U.S. interests. Axios. According to Trump, the operation was not confined to a simple police action, but involved coordinated strikes against military and security targets, neutralizing resistance and enabling the extraction of Maduro and his wife. He said that U.S. forces were ready to go again if necessary, and that they were not afraid of boots on the ground. These comments suggested that the United States was prepared to maintain a lasting presence if required to secure its strategic objectives. CBS News. Trump framed the operation as a decisive response to years of what he termed destabilizing behavior from the Maduro government. He accused Maduro of leading a regime that trafficked drugs, undermined democracy, and inflicted economic misery on the Venezuelan people. He also emphasized the strategic importance of Venezuelan oil reserves, promising that American companies would step in to repair and expand production, in the process generating revenue to support reconstruction. AP News. On the same day, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi announced that Maduro and his wife would be brought to New York to face federal criminal charges, including narcotics trafficking and conspiracy to import cocaine into the United States. Bondi stated that Maduro will soon face the full wrath of American justice on American soil, under long-standing indictments previously issued in U.S. courts. Foreign policy. The announcement triggered immediate and intense reactions at home and abroad. In Washington, Republican lawmakers largely rallied behind the president's actions, describing the operation as a bold assertion of American strength and a blow against drug trafficking networks. However, some officials, including Senate Democrats and legal scholars, raised concerns about the legality of the operation, noting that the U.S. had not received congressional authorization for a military strike against a sovereign nation's capital. AP News. Internationally, the response was overwhelmingly critical. Countries across Latin America and Europe condemned the action as a blatant violation of international law. Leaders emphasized the fundamental principle of state sovereignty and warned that such unilateral military interventions could trigger instability throughout the region. Reports indicate that the United Nations Security Council was scheduled to convene an emergency session to address the crisis and consider potential diplomatic and legal repercussions. The Guardian. Back in Venezuela, the political situation remained chaotic. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, who was sworn in as interim president by the Venezuelan Supreme Court, denounced the U.S. operation as an illegal and imperialistic act of aggression. She vowed that Venezuela would never again be subject to foreign domination and called for Maduro's immediate release. Other high-ranking Venezuelan military officers expressed defiance, insisting that they would continue to resist what they described as an assault on their sovereignty. AP News. Despite Rodriguez's claims, the Trump administration indicated that it expected cooperation from segments of the Venezuelan political establishment willing to work with U.S. objectives. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other officials engaged in diplomatic communications amid the rapidly unfolding crisis, suggesting that Washington was attempting to balance its interventionist posture with some level of regional cooperation, the Times of India. The operation immediately drew comparisons to historical U.S. interventions. Observers noted similarities with the 1989 invasion of Panama, where U.S. forces removed General Manuel Noriega and transported him to face drug trafficking charges in Miami. Analysts argued that the legal and geopolitical implications of capturing a sitting head of state and transporting him to face trial abroad were profound, raising questions about norms governing sovereignty, use of force, and extraterritorial jurisdiction. The Guardian. Critics in the United States argued that the move risked destabilizing an already fragile region, could lead to broader conflict, and might undermine global norms that have governed interstate relations since World War II. Some commentators warned that other countries could cite this action as a justification for their own interventions, further eroding the post-war international legal framework established under the UN Charter. AP News. In addition to the legal critiques, there were immediate humanitarian concerns. Reports from Caracas and other Venezuelan cities described explosions, smoke rising over urban areas, and disruptions to civilian infrastructure following the U.S. strikes. Accounts of casualties, including Venezuelan military personnel, civilians, and foreign nationals, began to emerge, heightening fears of a broader conflict with ripple effects throughout Latin America. The Guardian. Russia, a key ally of Venezuela, condemned the U.S. actions as a flagrant violation of international law and warned that it could have far-reaching consequences for global peace and security. China similarly expressed deep shock and called on the United States to immediately halt violations of Venezuelan sovereignty, emphasizing the importance of respecting the principles of the UN Charter. Other states in the Global South also voiced strong opposition, viewing the operation as a dangerous precedent that could be invoked by powerful states to justify future interventions. Global Times.
The controversy over Trump's statement that the U.S. would run Venezuela highlighted the broader ambiguity over what American control might mean in practice. Some analysts interpreted his remarks as indicating an intention to oversee transitional governance and reconstruction rather than direct permanent occupation. Others warned that without a clear legal or diplomatic framework, the United States could find itself in a protracted and costly nation-building effort with unpredictable consequences. People's Daily Online. Critically, reports from credible sources indicate that despite Trump's claims, Venezuela was not under direct U.S. administrative control at the time of these announcements. The Venezuelan state apparatus remained active, and local leadership, including loyalist military elements, continued to assert authority. Multiple reports noted that while Maduro had been captured and transported to the United States, the practical ability of Washington to govern the country on a day-to-day basis was extremely limited and would depend on a combination of diplomatic arrangements, internal power dynamics, and regional cooperation. Wikipedia. The call for a safe, proper transition raised questions about what such a process would entail. Trump suggested that Venezuela's oil industry, long crippled by mismanagement, sanctions, and economic collapse, would be a focal point of U.S. involvement. He claimed that rebuilding and activating Venezuela's oil sector would not only stabilize the country's economy, but generate revenue for reconstruction. This emphasis on oil drew sharp criticism from Latin American governments and international observers who argued that resource extraction should not be the centerpiece of interventionist policy. CBS News. Meanwhile, domestic reactions in the United States were sharply divided. Some Republicans praised the bold action as a decisive blow against a regime they have long criticized as authoritarian and corrupt. They pointed to Venezuela's history of political repression, economic collapse, and accusations of drug trafficking as justification for decisive intervention. Others, including notable Democrats, condemned the operation as unlawful and reckless, raising concerns about constitutional authority, respect for international law, and the potential for destabilizing broader regional security. New York Post. Legal scholars weighed in on the constitutional implications of the president directing military action without explicit congressional approval. The War Powers Resolution and constitutional debates about the scope of executive authority were invoked by critics, who argued that any extended military engagement or governance role in Venezuela would require legislative oversight and debate. AP News. Human rights organizations expressed alarm at reports of civilian casualties and urged independent investigations into the conduct of the U.S. strikes. They emphasized the need to protect non-combatants and to ensure accountability for any violations of international humanitarian law. At the same time, some advocacy groups highlighted Venezuela's chronic human rights abuses under the Maduro regime, arguing that intervention could be justified if it ultimately led to greater protection for Venezuelan citizens. The tension between these perspectives underscored the complexity of intervention debates in a world where humanitarian concerns and respect for sovereignty often clash. The Guardian. In the days following the operation, global markets reacted to the uncertainty surrounding Venezuelan oil production and geopolitical risk. Oil prices fluctuated as traders weighed the implications of renewed access to Venezuelan reserves, potential disruptions from regional instability, and broader concerns about great power competition. Markets also factored in reactions from Russia and China, which have economic